Who's my neighbor? I mean, we've been dealing with that now for the last 3 weeks, and last week I think was probably the hardest for us to really grasp and to live out. And that is when we're loving our neighbor that's our enemy. Today, it's a little different. We're going to probably be just about the opposite of what we were last week. What we've been doing is we've been flashing back to the life of Jesus in the Gospels and how he treated his neighbors, those that were in his life. And I want us to think this morning about how he rejoiced. He rejoiced with the success of his disciples, but he also wept with those that are hurting. So we're going to touch on a subject today that's vital as we are now moving into this return to, I don't know if this is accurate, but returning to be normal. Anybody here normal?
What is normal?
Yeah, you're looking up here thinking there is nothing normal, I know. Because I want to tell you this morning, one thing that I have seen over the past year and a half with this COVID mess is the fact of how it has divided people. It's made a mess. If you want to get depressed about the human condition, go to the social media pages and just looking to see how divided people have become. Now, I know there's always been divisions, right? There's been political divisions and racial divisions and cults versus patriot divisions, right? No? Oh, that was tough. But it seems to me like this virus that we've been dealing with has brought out the worst in people. I was reading on a post on Facebook where a man was on there. He was chastising everyone for wanting to get things back to normal, wanting to get things moving again. And he basically said, if you're not an infectious disease specialist, then shut your mouth because you're stupid. And that was all in caps. And I thought, okay, let's see where this goes. Because I knew he was just reaching out to punch. And so I got some popcorn, and I sat back on my computer and just watched, just to see what was going to happen. And I wasn't disappointed. It was nasty. And it got nasty very quickly. And then to my surprise, hypocrisy pops up on the screen, right? It exploded there because it turns out that the guy who started that mess actually owned a business that did not close during the crisis. This guy was making bank while other businesses were closing and may never open again. And yet he did not want things to go back, quote, to normal. What I want us to see today is that the situation that we find ourselves in has great potential for Satan to come in and cause problems. Now, I want you to bear with me for a moment, please. I'm going to make some exaggerated statements, so please, I know they're exaggerated. Okay, so I want you to know that as well. Because it seems to me that half of the people think that we're all going to die if we go outside or go anywhere except the grocery store, the hardware store, and the liquor store. Now, I hope this is not where we're running to, but in the world, right? In contrast, the other half thinks this is all stupid and it's politically motivated. We see some folks wearing masks, some not. I saw a person in Menards this last week. Joan and I have been moving for the past 2.5 weeks. And so we've been doing a lot of Menards stops. And so I was in Menards and I saw a guy in a full gas mask get up. He had to be dying because it was 95 degrees outside. But that's what it's come to. See, we have some folks who want to shake hands, they want to hug. We have others who just aren't comfortable with that yet. So the question this morning is, how do we, at Southport Heights Christian Church, how do we handle all this? What do we do with those who may not agree with my assessment of the situation. See, I know what we're going to do. We're going to do just like Jesus said, aren't we? We're going to argue. We're going to fight. We're going to shame each other on social media, right? We're going to have a masked section and we're going to have an unmasked section and we're going to just divide all over the church, right? That's exactly what Jesus called us to do. Oh, no, we are not. Today, we're going to spend time with this message talking about how we need, as a body of believers of Jesus, how we need to share our life with our neighbors. Today, we're going to examine 3 principles that will guide us in how we deal with those around us. Romans chapter 12, verse 15 is going to be the key verse for the day. Romans 12:15. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. We're going to rejoice with others. Paul encourages us in our relationships with one another, explaining how to be the community that we need to be of brothers and sisters in Christ. Rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. So the first thing that we need to understand this morning, the first principle is very simply this: we need to enter into the joy of others. Enter into the joy of others by delighting and being glad when others experience success, blessing, good situations in life. We're called to rejoice with our neighbors when they're rejoicing that something that just happened in their life. The word with in that context means to join in the company. Join in the company of those who are rejoicing. Join in the company of those who are weeping. When something happens good to a neighbor, rejoice with them, celebrate with them. However, can we just be flat out honest today? Sometimes it's really hard to rejoice with them when they're rejoicing, isn't it? Because they got something we didn't. They got something that they didn't deserve that we deserved it. So it just makes it very difficult for us to rejoice with them. One of the most challenging things in life is to rejoice at the success and the blessings of others, especially when we're hurting or we're in difficult situations. Listen, when the reports of Jesus' success came to John the Baptist and John's influence had started to decline, Jesus' influence was starting to rise. Look at John's response in John chapter 3, verses 27 to 30. John responded, "No one can receive anything unless it has been given to him from heaven. You yourselves can testify that I said I am not the Messiah, but I have been sent ahead of him. He who has the bride is the groom. But the groom's friend who stands by and listens for him rejoices greatly at the groom's voice. So this joy of mine is complete. He must increase, but I must decrease." Folks, we need to understand at this point in time in John's life, he was very popular. He was the man. People came out of the towns and cities, and they came out to the desert where John was preaching. He was so popular, people wanted to be around him. And then Jesus comes on the scene, and what's he do? He steals all of John's glory. So, put yourself in John's sandals for a minute. How would you respond to that? How would you respond? When we looked at the text, is John mad? Absolutely not. John knows that Jesus is doing what he was called to do, and John knew that he was doing what God called him to do. He rejoiced for somebody else. His joy was complete. Has this thought ever crossed your mind? Why did they get that blessing? That should have been mine. Okay, let's see it. Has that ever crossed your mind? Oh, come on. Am I the only one that way? Man, I feel bad today. Oh. But I know you've seen it play out at work, right? Someone gets a promotion, And instead of rejoicing with the one who got the promotion, people would start to grumble behind their back about how that person who received the promotion, they didn't deserve it. Right? Then all the negativity starts to flow, and it's just like a flooding river, and all this guy he doesn't deserve this. Let's leave it at work. Let's come home. Oh, can we rejoice with those in our home who are rejoicing? Folks, I've seen this play out in material blessings with folks even in the same home. Why did my brother get this or that? Why did my sister get this or that? We moved, not this past Friday, but Friday before last, a small group of Derek and Josiah came over and helped us move all of our furniture to the new condo that we moved into. And I looked out across the street, and I don't know whose it is, and I'm not going to point any fingers here, but there's a car that I dream of driving. It was a Porsche. Who in my neighborhood can have a Porsche when I don't? That should be mine, not theirs. But that's what we do. We think in terms of, it's mine. I should have received that. See, commentators that I looked at said it's much easier sometimes that we sympathize with people than it is to rejoice with people. To rejoice with those who succeed and rejoice over their success, because it creates within us this envy and this jealousy because we want what they have. That is that is the nature of who we are. And so it's easier sometimes to mourn with folks. But we need to rejoice. We need to be happy. And so why is it that we need to rejoice? One simple reason. We follow Jesus. Need no other answer. We follow Jesus. And so when a great blessing happens, let's bring it into family. When a great blessing happens for your children or your grandchildren, are you excited for them? Are you happy for them? Are you jealous? Think about that for a moment. My kids have had opportunities in their young lives that my wife and I haven't seen yet, and we're old people. Right? We've not seen it. For example, my daughter, Karina, she traveled to Egypt and worked at a children's home as a class for college. I've never been to Egypt, but I rejoiced with her because she got to go. Or my son, Ryan, he's got a job that affords him to do things like, here you go, affords him to do things like all-inclusive vacations. Oh, now I'm on the verge of jealous. Right? No, I'm excited that he can do that. He and his family can do those things. I'm excited for them, and I think you are too for your children. But I want to tell you, as excited as I am for them, I need to be that excited for you as well. When you have something to rejoice about, I need to rejoice with you. Not because you're my children, but because you are my family. And we need to rejoice with each other. And it should be no different with our neighbors. We need to rejoice when they rejoice. I just mentioned that we moved. And we had a couple, neighbors to our, as you face the house to the right. And they were just so sad that we were leaving. And I guess I understand that. But I would have liked to have thought that maybe they would have rejoiced a little with us in that move. And I think they did. They had a little fear and trepidation about who was going to be moving into that house right next door to them. And so once they found out as a very nice young couple, they could care less about us. That's not true. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 25 and 26 says this. I'm using the Christian Standard Bible for a lot of the verses today. So that there would be no division in the body, but that the members would have the same concern for each other. So if one member suffers, all the members suffer. But here's the other. If one member is honored, all members rejoice with it. Rejoice. Do you like being happy for people around you? Lifting up people around you. We're to be one with people. Sharing life together. Being connected to each other. See, when one of us is hurting, then we all need to hurt. But when one of us is rejoicing, we all need to rejoice. We need to share in that. Because when we allow envy and jealousy to enter that picture, it becomes extremely divisive. And we know that God doesn't like division. Jesus, in John chapter 17, prayed a very significant prayer right before he went to heaven about being unified. So listen, as believers, as we sit here this morning, we cannot allow things to divide us. We can't allow things to hinder us from sharing our lives with our neighbors. We have to show the love and compassion and concern that God has called us to share with others. In Luke chapter 10, verse 17 and 21 declares that Jesus, in verse 21 says, he was full of joy through the Holy Spirit. Now, oftentimes, when we start to describe Jesus and we think about those things in the Scripture to describe him, one of the things that comes up is he was a man of sorrow. He was a man of sorrow. But yet, Hebrews 1:9 and Psalm 45 declares that God anointed Jesus, I love this, anointed Jesus with the oil of joy. Now, in my crazy mixed up my mind, you know what I thought about immediately? The bottle of Joy dish detergent. It's joy. It's joy. That's what Jesus said. You know, I've heard from some people as they were chastising me for not watching The Chosen. Has anybody been watching The Chosen?
No.
I hear from people about The Chosen and how they describe Jesus as being someone who's lovable and filled with joy. And I believe that's an accurate description of Jesus. And so, next weekend, Labor Day weekend, I'm going to binge. I'm going to binge on The Chosen and try to see what that's all about. Because I believe, as people have described it to me out of The Chosen, we look at verse 15 of Romans 12 again, I believe that we will find Jesus rejoicing with those who rejoice and weeping with those who weep. But here's the other side of that text. Not only are we supposed to enter the joy of our neighbors, but we're also supposed to enter the pain of our neighbors. And we're to weep with them. You know, this is a part of the verse that may be easier to carry out than that first part at times. But I will tell you, too, it's also very easy to become so insensitive to the plight of other people. Sometimes there's just so much stuff going on around us that we forget about what our neighbors might be going through. There are times, this is a hard saying, but I'm going to say it. There are times in our arrogance that we think that what's happening to them is their fault. Therefore, if it's their fault, they deserve what's happening to them. I would pray that that doesn't happen with you. But I see it. So if we're going to weep with those who weep, then we got to allow ourselves to enter the pain of others. When people are hurting, many times just being with them and weeping with them is the most excellent ministry that you can have. That's all you can do. I just want to share with you some personal things right now because this is so real for me anymore. In the past 7 weeks, I've been involved with 10 funerals. And so I've had some real opportunity to experience some of this. Wasn't just a few weeks ago that I sat with Pat Wilson and her sons. You know, at times like that, preachers should have everything lined up and ready to go and what to say and be the smartest man on the face of the earth, right? I was as dumb as a rock. I didn't have one intelligent thing to say. I just sat with them. I cried. And then we prayed. That's all I could do. And then on Thursday, August 19th, I received a phone call from Jenny. I thought she was calling because she had volunteered to help us move. And so, you know, I just jumped into the conversation, was having all this great conversation. And basically I was having that conversation with myself because she was somewhere else. And she finally got me to shut up long enough that she said, hey, can I tell you something that's not so good? Sure. At the time she told me I was passing her house. And she shared with me that her sister April was found dead that day. I just about wrecked my car. So I pulled off to the side of the road and all I could do was cry. There was nothing I could do for that family. And if you're sitting here today and you've got testosterone flowing through your body, men, we want to fix things. And there was not a thing I could do to fix what was broken. I went the next morning to Joy's house and just met with some of the family that was there. And again, there wasn't any intelligent words. It was just being there, sharing, crying, and praying. Can I tell you that's what Jesus did? That's what he did with Mary. And also that's what Job's friend did so wonderfully at first. I like this. Job chapter 2 verse 13 says, they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. It was when they opened their mouths that the story took a downturn. When they tried to share their wisdom, the story went downhill from there. But folks, when we flash back to see Jesus, we see the Son of God weeping with those who wept. As he approached the tomb of Lazarus in John 11:35, the shortest verse in the Bible, you know when you're getting points at camp for memorizing scriptures? This was my first one. Amen. John 11:35, Jesus wept. That's the whole verse. Yep. Jesus wept. John 11, Jesus learns that his good friend Lazarus had died. And when Jesus arrives in Bethany at the home of Lazarus' sisters, Mary and Martha, 4 days has passed since Lazarus died. And then there's another verse in there I really love. He stinketh. I love that. But in this story, Jesus steps into one of humankind's greatest griefs. It's when we lose a loved one. The pain and the emotional agony that Martha and Mary felt was overwhelming. And just as Jesus stepped into their moment of grief, their moment of pain, he does the same for us. He steps into our greatest hurts, our confusion, our trials, and our loss. In the story, Mary goes out to meet Jesus. She falls at his feet and she utters the same words that Martha did. Martha said these same things. She said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And Mary was in the presence of Jesus. Listen, the scripture tells us what Jesus did. John 11:33, it says he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Jesus' reaction is powerful. He's not removed from the sufferings or the pain or the heartbreak. Rather, he entered into that emotional pain. He entered into the world of those ladies who were hurting, who are mourning at the loss of their brother. Now, here's what's crazy about this, okay? We got to understand, Jesus knew what he was about to do. In John 23, Jesus knew that he was going to bring Lazarus back from the dead, but that's not what he talked about. See, rather than going to Mary and Martha and saying, hey, guess what I'm going to do here in a couple minutes? I'm just going to bring him back from the grave and you'll all just be fine. That's not what he did. That's not what they needed. Rather, he wept with them. You see, the biblical response to those who are hurting and in pain, our first response is to comfort. Comfort. Jesus weeps with those who weep. In her moment of sorrow, Jesus entered into Mary's pain just to comfort her. That's the picture for me then, is we've got to get close enough to our neighbors to know when they're in pain so that we can enter into their pain with them. Listen, when your kids are hurting, do you know your kids are hurting? Do you know when they're hurting? Yeah, they'll let you know, won't they? They'll let you know when they're hurting. But I'm going to tell you what, if you hurt one of my kids, I'm going to hurt you. We know when someone is hurting when we're close enough to them. And we understand that. But let me tell you, there are 4 challenges that I think we face when we try to get into the pain of those around us. Number 1, we don't know what to say or do. We don't know what to say or do. But here's the key. We got to remember, we don't need to say anything. We just need simply to be present and to listen and to cry if that's what's called for. The second thing that happens in our world today that kind of is disturbing is we're just too busy. We're too busy. Because I'm going to tell you what, weeping with those who are hurting takes time. And there are times that it takes lots of time. But yet we see Jesus went out of his way to comfort them. Here's a third challenge we have. We're afraid that we won't be able to answer their questions. Let me take that fear away. You will not be able to answer the questions. That's not a fear, that's truth. We can't answer their questions. We're not there to provide answers to the questions. We're not there to fix things. We're there to provide comfort. Hold a hand. Put an arm around a shoulder. Cry. We're there to bring comfort. And the fourth thing that I see as a challenge is that we're worried that we can't fix them. We can't fix the sorrows. It's not our job to fix them. Guys, it took me a long, long time to realize that sometimes when my wife come to talk to me, that she wasn't asking me to fix anything. She just wanted me to hear her. And that's what it's like when we go to enter someone's pain. We're not there to fix anything. We are there to comfort. If we could answer every question that came across the mind of those who are hurting and in pain, if we could answer every question, it's not taking away the pain. It's still there. The pain goes on. You know, the requirement that we have to love our neighbors and to comfort our neighbors, can I just say, that's going to be difficult for a lot of us. Because it focuses on the emotional life. And just to be blatant, many of us in here this morning, we have trouble getting in touch with our emotions, don't we? As a matter of fact, a lot of us even run the other way when we start to get in touch with those emotions. Because we don't know what's going to happen when we do. But Paul tells us not only are we to get in touch with our own emotions, but we're to get in touch with each other's emotions. We're to get in touch with our neighbors' emotions and what they're going through. Because listen, we can't be afraid to get into the pain of others, because lives most often change in a time of crisis. Lives most often change in a time of crisis. You know, even with the virus that we're dealing with, before you judge the response of others, before you think that they're stupid and you write them off, try entering their world. Or as you've heard the cliche, walk a mile in their shoes before you callously write them off. Verse 16 of our text in Romans chapter 12 says this: live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, instead associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own estimation. We're to live in harmony with our neighbors. And this verse rings true for us today because we're striving to put together the pieces of the destruction that COVID has caused. Many lives have been seemingly ruined by both the virus and the steps that were taken to protect people from the virus. And so whether it's politics or it's COVID-19, those things are not the focus of our lives. Jesus, and only Jesus, is the focus of our lives. He is the author and the perfecter of our faith. If you look at the way this verse is written, it's a command. It's a command to live in harmony. It's a command to live in harmony with people that don't think the same way that you think. They don't think the same about everything that you think about. Rather, the command indicates that we're to think the same toward each other. We're to have the same regard for each other. It's not about the issue, it's about the people. That word think gives us the idea that we should all have the same attitude toward one another. You see, living in harmony is with one another is not an issue of thinking the same about every issue in life, but it's just thinking about the other person and the attitude that they have toward you. We need to live in harmony. And I love the way this concludes here. There are two other commands in verse 16. In that context, command not to be proud. Associate with the humble. Listen, that's not a plea to allow social or economic or any other area to keep you from treating everyone the same. Everyone using the same love that God has given you for each and every person. Because when you think you're better than others, you're going to put all your needs ahead of theirs. You're going to put all your wants ahead of their needs. You're going to put your desires above them. That is not what God has called us to do. The last command in there is not to be wise in your own estimation. That's a plea not to discount the thoughts of others because you think you know it all. Can I tell you something? Those of you who think you know it all, you really do annoy us who do know it all. There's not a day in my life goes by that I don't learn something from somebody. I think that's so true for everyone. When we begin to think so highly of ourselves that we can't learn from other people, then we need to step back, look in the mirror, and reevaluate life. Because we should be learning all the time from different people. The concept of being a disciple of Christ is a disciple is a learner. When you stop learning, you stop being a disciple. We want to be disciples of Christ. And we want to be the neighbor that God has called us to be. So it means that we share in the joys and we share in the burdens of our neighbors. And we strive to live in harmony with them. You know, when COVID began, probably, we shut down in March, but probably about June, we started to hear the saying is that we're all in this together. You remember hearing that? We're all in this together. Well, this morning, church, I want to shout that we are all in this together. We cannot allow anything to challenge or change the truth. The challenge this morning as you leave is when you're in doubt, and you will be in doubt. When you're in doubt, take the path of love. Because the natural thing to do, the human thing to do, the nature of the beast here, if you will, for us to do, is we take the path of division, the path of strife, and the path of anger. None of which do we find anywhere in the book that God has called us to. But He has called us to a path of love. When's the last time that you laughed and rejoiced with your neighbors when something great happened for them? And when's the last time that you wept with your neighbors because something tragic happened with them? There was a tragedy that happened this past week, wasn't there? Several Marines, 13 I believe was the number. Marines lost their lives. How many of you saw that? You read that? Did that affect you? They were your neighbors. They're my neighbors. I don't know that any of them live close to me. But had they, I'd probably go try to see the family. Folks, we don't know who we're going to impact for Christ if we're not willing to step out and to be the neighbor that God has called us to be.